If you've been coming to COFES any length of time, then you have most likely met Ping. Ping is a person whom I greatly admire for her many, many achievements, and whom I greatly appreciate and love for her ongoing support of us here at COFES. She is a model of courage, of business acumen, and of technical perspicacity that just overwhelms me whenever I think about the things that she's done. I'm not going to take up the whole keynote time to tell of her many accomplishments, but I do suggest that you Google her and you'll learn many, many interesting things. So with that, let me introduce my good friend and my model, Ping Fu.
Thank you, Joe. I feel really loved. So it's again my honor to introduce the 2001 keynote speaker, John Gage. John created the phrase, network is the computer. I'm actually glad he didn't create the phrase, we are the dot of .com. John studied mathematics at Berkeley, and there he worked with another technology legend, Bill Joy, who created the Berkeley Unix. And Bill subsequently invited John to join Sun Microsystems at a very early stage when there are just a whole bunch of graduate students. And later in 2008, Bill invited John again to join Klein & Perkins, which is one of the leading venture capital firms. So I met John, gosh, feels like a lifetime, but really only last year. Our paths have crossed many, many, many times, but for some reason, we just never really met or been introduced in person. So last year, I met him at a conference called Techonomy, which if I name who attended the conference, it would sound like name dropping. John, needless to say, knows everyone there, and I'm the one that people would say, tell me what Geomagic does. So since then, we have been great friends. I really admire John for his brilliant mind as well as his humanity. He's going to be here for the entire conference, so I hope you all have a chance to meet him and talk to him, ask him some of the things he did in the past, like Robert Kennedy campaign or running graceful debt councils. He's not just someone who's in technology, but he has done a lot of things outside of technology. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome John Gage.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Ping. I wanted to find out, is Chuck House still here? There he is. All right. So I don't know, I think about half of you had the opportunity yesterday to hear Chuck talk. And last night I was reading Chuck's book, so I'm going to do an unabashed advertisement here. This book, The HP Phenomenon, is what I want to talk about today. It's about how smart people, knowing something that nobody else knows, that the power of the technology that they've created could become something in service to creating brand new areas of technology, brand new businesses, brand new ways of being in society. So there's a lot of detail in here. Chuck has the courage to start off with Carly Fiorina, but I don't think I'll start off on that whole thing. The book begins with, what do you do after you've built a gigantic technology, a world technology leader, a gigantic company? What do you do when you seem headed for the wall, when absolutely every disaster you could imagine is about to hit you, you're firing your CEO, and oh my God, new problems occur? How does a culture, a group of people that have decided that they could work together in pursuit of something, some common aim, how does a culture become resilient? And what are the components of that culture? So This book last night made me stay up late because I changed my talk around a bit. I wanted to talk about the things that created. I'm killing this PowerPoint thing. Is that okay with everybody? So what I thought I'd do is take a little exploration. And if I'm successful in my exploration, at the end of this talk, I will, I hope, have persuaded you of something. And here's what I hope to persuade you of. The stuff that Chuck House and HP, the crowd in Silicon Valley, the way they thought, and the explosion of technology, the incredible creation of value. John Doerr says it's $1 trillion we created of technology just in Silicon Valley. That explosion depended upon several things: technical change, understanding the technology, but human change. And I want to persuade you by the end of this talk that we're at that point in 2011. In 1980, Sun began in 1982, as Ping said, 15 grad students. When we began, we were at the edge of something new. The power of the chips, the power of all the computational advances, coupled with the network, set us off on this 20-year explosion. I want to point out that we're at a point now that's very similar to 1980, that point where we were putting the technologies together, creating new companies, creating new ways to think. And to support my case, I'm going to pull up a lot of quotes from people smarter than I am. But in some, who had a chance yesterday to see Joe Junke's augmented reality talk? All right, so in that, he showed some evidence of the things we were thinking about, not me, but the crowd in 1960, the Ivan Sutherlands, the creators, those that imagined the future. Today, the result of Brad's poll, 28 touch-sensitive tablet-like devices contrasted with 4 last year. That's a percentage rate of increase that's pretty important. The bottom of it is why. And I assert the why is that it moves from that really stupid interface that I have sitting on this machine with keyboards and mice into a human interface where you touch something and stuff happens. You use your hands. You use your gestures. You have a way of flying through space. Now, what's missing in that surgical example is the haptic part, the sensual feedback. But it's coming. So I want to show you those that imagined all this, for whom, in some sense, we are the army. You can dream of things, but until there is engineering software that makes things and makes things happen, it's not real. So this crowd, and I was stunned to find out how diverse a crowd this is a crowd that covers every aspect of technology. I thought, well, let's just talk a bit about why do changes, technical changes that could change the world, not get adopted at some points in time and get adopted at other points in time, and how can we be sensitive to this? So I started, Brad was on my case for a title for this talk, so I remembered what Babbage said. Here's Babbage building these unbelievable, if you have not seen these in the British Museum, do it. He built the difference machine, the analytic machine. This is metal. These are gears. These things calculate. These are differential equation solvers in gears. And his compatriot, Lady Ada, invented programming languages. So Babbage, who's trying to get money out of the Royal Society to build another one of these computational machines, which carry all the elements of anything on the internet today, but they were in metal, said, propose to any Englishman, any principle, or any instrument, however admirable, and you will observe that the whole effort of the English mind is directed to find a difficulty, a defect, or an impossibility in it. If you speak to him of a machine for peeling a potato, he will pronounce it impossible. If you peel a potato with it before his eyes, he will declare it useless because it will not slice a pineapple. impart the same principle or show the same machine to an American. Now remember, from Babbage's point of view, these are people living in muddy little cities somewhere. An American or one of our colonists, and you'll observe that the whole effort of his mind is to find some new application of the principle, some new use for the instrument. Yesterday, in the sustainability and design sessions, again and again we talked about the tool, the instrument, the way of thinking, the device, the instantiation in software that would let us do things. And again, people pointed out, you can have the best tool, the best instrument. It doesn't mean it's going to be used. You have to find a way to get into someone's head to say, this is why you should think in a new way. And by the way, use of the tool will change how you think. So, his statement, new application of the principle, new use for the instrument, I made a little list of those that have done this. Who have created these new instruments, just in the tiny little domain of computing and networking? Well, you have to start off with digitization and Fourier and Nyquist and Tukey and how you get the mathematics right at the bottom. Then you go to those that built it. Babbage built it. And not only did he build it, Lady Ada, supported by her father, Lord Byron, wrote in 1843 a description of looping and state, the components of programming languages. Now that was a long time ago. Why did it not go anywhere? Well, gears are hard to make expensive and the Royal Society's not giving him any money. But the components, same year, more or less, Boole points out that with simple logic operations, 3 of them, you can devise a system of logic that can tackle any problem. 1847. It's not till 1937 that Claude Shannon says, has anybody noticed that these little on-off flip-flop latches can implement Boolean logic? Putting those two ideas together was, how could one say this, powerful. Now you'll notice I put Shannon's name in blue. Why? Because he was a student when he did this. And as I go through the list, and I'll just go flipping through, notice a lot of blue there? Those are all the students that created much of the world that we depend upon in building everything new. Why students? And over the years, I must say, the best answer I've ever come up with for this, which I don't have a great answer for, but the best answer I've come up with is, students don't have to go to meetings. Now, we're in a meeting, and meetings are vastly powerful. And by the time we finish Sunday, those people here that don't know people in a different part of the industry are going to meet each other. I drank a little bit too much wine last night and met a lot of people. It was very interesting. So we're going to all do that, and I think the wine's a good idea too. So the mixture, rubbing up against each other with different ways of thinking, generates new ideas, and that's why we're here. And at the end of it, as our ideas turn into things and become real, this generates, I'm going to argue, brand new objects, brand new industries, and brand new economies. I'm lucky because I was a grad student at Berkeley. There's Bill Joy. Bill and I had teamed on a bunch of projects on the Berkeley campus. He is stratospherically smart, but he doesn't like to go to meetings. And so I would take his seat in the meetings. I'd get a download from Bill about things, and then I'd go sit in the meeting and explain Bill's view of the world to people. And if I was good at it, I could get people to see the importance, in this particular instance, of getting that Berkeley campus networked to a point where everything on that campus interconnected. Now, the company we began, for a Berkeley guy, sort of embarrassing, but for Chuck, it's just right. Stanford University Network, for a bunch of Berkeley guys. We tried Berkeley University. Bunn Microsystems was getting no funding. Nobody would be interested. Sun Microsystems, boy, we got money. The Sun was, and we started off. And we built everything we did on the names I'm now going to show you. So Paul Baran and the Packet crowd and Vannevar Bush thinking up little devices that could connect. He thought about microfiche, but nonetheless, microfilm. Things could be linked together, a literary corpus of interconnection. JCR Licklider, humans and computers are symbiotic. Well, now there's an idea, and there's an idea that every person in this room is today working on. We're the troops. We're carrying out these ideas. Doug Engelbart, human intelligence is augmented by its interaction with these brand new symbol manipulating devices. There's an idea. We're just beginning to explore this. So those creators in the 60s, and I'll show you a few things they said in the 50s and 60s, are the creators of the pathway we're on. But I want to assert 2011, some other people are coming into play. And to just foreshadow what I want to assert, the ability to do new material construction, inserting atoms into lattices that yield new semiconductor devices, unknown materials, single sheet graphene, properties not conceived 10 years ago. We're in a territory here with new materials, and on the bio side, the engineering just announced of microbes that convert photons to electrons not using the old photosynthetic electron cascade pathways, 1% efficient, but new non-photosynthetic cascades, 10 or 15% efficient. We can make a bug that is 15 times more efficient than photosynthesis going on outside in those leaves. And we all depend, of course, on that photosynthesis. Now that's a big deal. And when something like this merges with what we've been doing, suddenly capabilities emerge we just have never considered. Every day something new will occur to us. So we've got to immerse ourselves in it. So I go on down through the list. David had pointed out very clearly that Patrick Hanratty, the very early GM CAD systems, you had to do numerical control on all those systems to count them in as CAD. I've always attributed student Ivan Sutherland with Sketchpad as the person that brought together a lot of things. Sage, all those systems had stuff in them that had not been turned into a human, allowing a computer to take the shake out of your hand when you drew a line. From drawing to analytics, that's a new world. From analytics to physics, how wide is that copper line? What is the current carrying capability? My God, your design will melt. Having the computer do things for you, solve those equations for you as you draw, here we are. Our minds are different as a result of it. So those 1957, 1963, those instantiations, here we are 50 years later, and we're tackling a new terrain where the new materials and the new biological life forms, the new organisms we're designing are all in the mix. So this is in a time of, I would say, extraordinary opportunity. So as I go on down the list of who created all this stuff, Vince Cerf and Steve Crocker were just some San Fernando Valley high school kids, and out came the packets and the protocols that let us build the internet. As I go on down through this, if we could just get ourselves a nice SPICE system. Students created SPICE. It was not a professorial creation. Open source. Whit Diffie invented open public key encryption. Diffie was a grad student. So this list, as I go down, of all these people creating things, Mitch Kapor, Patterson and Hennessy were professors, but the RISC chip stuff, originally IBM, was picked up by a set of grad students that have been building these devices ever since. And when you go to John Petty's talk and find out about the new directions hardware is taking, there's a group here from Intel. We've been, all of us, working on making not only device size smaller, but in attempting to get as much parallelism, multi-core, as we possibly can. And this is coming on in gangbusters, so there's going to be processing speed that matches what we heard yesterday from Chris Deneef about infinite computational capability. I'm always a little wary about infinite, Chris, but nonetheless, big is a good destination for us all. So as we go through what you saw, and Jaron Lanier with his gloves, you just saw yesterday from Joe Junke the instantiation of augmented reality and manipulation of things by human intervention. Now notice these dates are 1980s. All this, let's make stuff out of the old stuff, 1990s. Berners-Lee, we can make a little protocol to share things. Stallman, the guy that, I guess he was the character, archetypal, hollow-eyed guy sleeping 1 hour a week and hammering. I know, he slept under his desk. I mean, that was a Stallman. But when Stallman said, I can build the core of a Unix system, all of it, very simply, I can implement all these things. It's nice that Torvalds comes along later and actually does do the little core part, but the idea that all of this software, to be free, could interrelate and the interfaces would be open and everybody could see them. Stallman, one grad student, writes this stuff and puts it up freely for all the rest of us to use. Mark Andreessen, who used to work for Ping, instantiated this visible way of making the web pages. It's nice that you built a web page. The power of being able to look at the source for it. You didn't have to ask permission from anybody to learn how to do it. You could just look at what everybody else did. Your creative platform was raised by the innovations and creations of everybody else who could ask for more. What a world we've been in. When you start moving on into the world of programming languages, one of the insights that came out of a large group of people was these operating systems are junk. I mean, it's just messy, and they're all screwed up inside. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could create programming languages that contained in them security, safety, all the object-oriented talk we've gone through for so many years? We could create elements in a programming language in which the language protected the resulting code. That's a pretty deep idea. And suddenly, when you can promulgate programs across a network, your old ideas of the boundary of what a machine is evaporate. It doesn't matter, except for latency. It doesn't matter where the computation's taking place. So we suddenly, out of all these different pieces, created this sort of rich marshland where there are a lot of different organisms of different capabilities, and they can all live together. So people begin to use these words. Ecology. Things are out there in the soup. We're all making this brand new kind of technical environment. And people using this new capability. Jerry Yang starts just making simple lists of stuff. It turns into Yahoo. So I keep going down the list of things. Larry and Sergey, nobody thought that Google, except for its simplicity and the cute little diagram, did anything innovative. There were 20 other people that had all done more or less the same thing, but it caught people's imagination. So this list of all of these inventions that came up and people creating faster and faster stuff, Sutherland went on, of course, to build terabit interconnects and is working at this moment on a thing that I consider for all of those of us in computing critically important, the notion of asynchronous processing. It's not difficult to state what the problem is. If I'm an electron on a chip and I'm moving along a circuit and the drum beat, gigahertz drum beat, boom, latches. All the circuitry responds. Boom, it all responds. When I'm down at 12 nanometers and I got a chip which from my perspective, speed of light's going to take me quite a while to get across the chip, at some point, inevitably, we have to cut pieces of the chip free to move at their own rates. Asynchronous. Asynchronous processing. The internet is asynchronous. We're not synchronizing across everything because we've got latency. So this ability for hardware people to bring the absolute fundamental speed possible out of the materials that compose the processors we're building, this is an intellectual leap. We got to let pieces all go off at different speeds and then assemble the results in a way that's coherent and accurate. So Ivan never rests, and he's working on these things, as are a lot of other people, and it's going to lead to what John Petty's going to tell you about the speed increases that are coming up for us. So I kept going on people using these things. Let's have free phone calls. Why not? The net works. Let's start listing all the, let's list everybody and put embarrassing details up on the net so everybody will want to read about it. Great idea. Let's all share. So these things now, given we've built the ever-rising infrastructure beneath, just explode in ways that no one anticipated. So now there's some really tough stuff coming. One of the nice things, I think, in the last 5 or 6 years that will have a vast impact on us, Peter Norvig at Google Research Labs won the machine translation competition, I think it was 5 years ago or so, by saying, here I am, here's the Google team, and by the way, you've given us texts in Arabic and texts, Russian's essentially trivial because we've done so much on Russian. What was I guess it was Arabic and Chinese. And they did a better job in translating Russian and Chinese, or Arabic and Chinese, than anyone else. Nobody on their team spoke Arabic or Chinese. Brute statistical force, gigantic corpus of professionally translated United Nations documents gives you the ability to find a phrase here, and it was translated like that, and I don't have to understand it to do, as we all do every day if we're trying to read a lot of things in other languages, push the button and let the machines in the back match up the English or the Arabic or the Chinese with each other. That statistical approach, this kind of finding patterns in very high dimensional space, is an area that's going to yield for us something far beyond touching the tablet. We're going to talk to the thing. Wouldn't that be nice? I mean, think how many years we've spent. How many people here have carpal? I mean, really. So we're in a world where we're going to suddenly transform, and we're seeing a lot of it now, transform the way we take all of our intellectual software product and interact with the human beings that want to use it. So my list goes on, and it gets down toward the end into something which is not in the past considered part of computing, but when we go back 20 or 30 years and say, so what is the basic problem for us to build things that will reach 6 or 7 billion people? Simple answer, batteries. No electrons, no computing. No electrons, no network. So batteries are as much a part of the computational landscape as anything else. And I saw a month and a half ago a guy take lithium, which explodes when you put it in water, coat it with a new polymer, dunk it in a glass of water, and have it light up a display. Because the polymer protects the lithium from direct water contact, but the oxygen in the water and the lithium in this little slab are creating power enough to run any of the devices we use. That's sort of interesting. Forget all these wires, carry your lithium power source with you. Now, lithium, so I'm a little careful about lithium, so we're going to let them take care of it exploding once in a while, and oops, gee, I didn't mean to dent the polymer, and that water that got in, I'm not going to fly on airplanes where people are carrying these things, although we all do fly on airplanes with lithium every day. But if that works, and it does, this is going to, in the next year, change our ideas about, well, here I am, where's my power? I watched a lot of us scramble around yesterday trying to find a place to plug in over in the bar. So, all right, so we're changing. So that's a set of instruments and a set of new uses that younger or newer or more innovative people have weaved together to create this kind of environment that we're all in the business of trying to understand and extend. So, now here's this is going to be the deep think part of all this. Well, I don't know. But the first thing I realized about what I had to do to take what we'd built when we built these networked machines was go explain what a network is to people who had never seen one. So there's a wonderful line. How many people remember the oversized white book written by Ted Nelson that was called Computer Lib. And there I see hands, hands, hands. Big white book, and on the cover's a fist, and the first line of the book says, "Any nitwit can understand computers, and many of them do." Everybody should understand these things. That's Ted Nelson's manifesto. And it went on in a very nice way to explain how this stuff worked, and it was accessible to everybody. That book had a big impact on me because I've been wandering around in mathematics. I had no idea about this. When I read this, he keeps urging you to take new instruments and new tools and think of how you could use them. And when he talked about hypertext, Nelson came up with that word, linking stuff together. Suddenly I realized all my work, whereas I've got an equation and I can't, am I going to go to an integral to look this stuff up? Do you remember how to do integration by parts? I don't think so. So I want something to give me some help, and if it linked to something, it's a blessing. This guy's telling me it's possible. Oh, God, all right. So language, the way you express things, when you come up with a word, Brad did not ask us how many touch-sensitive tablet devices with a relatively high resolution but a horrible battery life are owned in this room. He said, who's got an iPad? There's a word for it now. So words matter. Walcott, brilliant guy, said if we're going to talk about literacy, what's really literate is an instinct for metaphor. And when you listen to everybody talk, listen to the metaphor inside. When an instinct for metaphor goes, we lack what we call civilization because we no longer make parallels. We no longer draw similes. A thing is just a thing. Kofes isn't a party. If I said Kofes is a locomotive barrel, just saying that conveys something instantly in every one of us because we are metaphorical beings. And if you have a metaphor and iPad, iPhone, you say something like that, it creates an object. Now it's a thing you can talk about. You can make comparisons with other things. And I'm asserting new objects create new industries, industries create economies, economies create societies. So here's my initial example. That list I showed you of everybody thinking about what is a computer, Shannon says we can build them, so let's build them. Intel starts, HP, all these entities that are saying this could be of some use here, we could make things, start talking about it. So what do they say? Engelbart says the computer is a desktop. That's what I have in front of me here. He invented Windows. He did the ACMI IEEE demonstration with this gigantic screen, and on that screen were windows. Now, you ever seen Windows before? So Stanford came up with this way of talking. It's a desktop. Jobs, wandering around, stole the idea. Let's go do it, Gates really stole the idea. We have Windows, we have desktops, we have folders, we have files, those are all metaphors. There's not a file in this thing. There's no folder in this thing. There's not a desktop in this thing. There's a flat display screen. Ivan said one word, sketchpad. Need I say more? So suddenly that power of that metaphor carries across. When you first heard about sketchpad, you didn't have to read the whole paper. You said, I got it. I got it. So how about Carver-Mead? It's a design rule checker. It's just actually taking the physics underlying a circuit and applying a little reasonable physics computation. So suddenly we've got a computer is a design rule checker. Computer is a network of distributed memory and computation. That's sort of a bad metaphor because the pools of memory, they're not pools, but there's memory storage. So we start using these words. Whoops, backwards here. Got sketchpad. Then the book metaphor. So when Ted Nelson or Berners-Lee or Mark Andreessen say, these pages with links are a lot like a book. Got it. It's a library. It's a linked literature. Borges, Eco, all writing books about this literary power of having things linked. Now, if you're in the military, you want a command and control center. So that's what so much money went for. Alan Kay, when he spoke here, showed, I always loved Kay saying, the only person as a composer that had a father rich enough for an orchestra was Mendelssohn. So Mendelssohn, the kid, could write something, and Mendelssohn, the dad, had the orchestra play it that night for dinner. Well, now you have GarageBand. So every person in the world with a computer and GarageBand is a Mendelssohn, because you've got the computer is an orchestra. Computer's a market, and that's the one we're going to be exploring forever. The computer, now we move into the bio analogies, and all of us talk about this stupid thing is trying to. We all add the human into our computer. The program is attempting to, it wants to. Well, we make them into organisms. So Danny Hillis wrote a lovely book about how the way the computers, thinking machines, these devices that he was building, in some sense, are similar to the brain, to the way the organisms are. And then it gets spacier and spacier, and Kurzweil, yesterday there were a few comments about Singularity University. Kurzweil will show these exponential curves where, well, you know, there's a number of neurons in our brain, and notice these computers are reaching that neuronal connectivity point. When does this stuff all cross? And at that moment, there'll be a flash of light, and there'll be a singularity and all sorts of new things. Well, who knows? I mean, I don't know, but it is pretty clear that the devices we're building are passing across some kind of a threshold here where prior ways of talking about machines talked about them as inanimate. And now we talk about them as almost human. There's a wonderful book, which I actually brought. Oh, Brad will hold it up. It's called what's the exact title? The Most Human Human. Now, what's that mean? Every year since 1991, there's the Turing Award. So this guy that made a lot of money in Europe funds everybody to come in a room and sit with screens behind in closed-off rooms, and the bots, the programs, the software attempts to fool you, behave like a human. And the humans, they've got a set of humans there too, attempt to make everybody realize they're human. So at the end, there's the award for the most human computer, and there's also an award for the most human human. Because many times the humans have been classified as software by the judges because they were so robotic and they didn't answer things in a way that's human. But now it's getting closer and closer. Watson, I mean, it's getting closer to close. When you make calls today, many of those same award winners at the Lubner contest are doing commercial work because they're actually hearing you and doing something instead of giving you the normal voice mail jumping around. So here's a new set of metaphors. And I'm asserting that in this new world where we're now extending engineering software to engineering organisms, engineering organs, engineering materials with brand new... We need some more metaphorical power here. You know, I don't know if we're all summoned to the cause of being literary people, but when something happens that needs a new name or a new analogy or a new way of thinking about it, we've got to come up with something. So I just stole all this when I, as Ping said, trying to describe what it was we were doing at Sun, said, well, we all have these metaphors for computers. The network is the computer. Everything on it participates in some form of processing. Everything is heterogeneous. You can have color printers and big fast machines with huge pools of memory and little dinky ones. That's why there are Crays, and that's why there are little Linux boxes, and they cannot run easily the same algorithms. There are many algorithms. Take all your finite element. More memory is good. Little separated pools of memory is not good. So if we can figure out ways to take the devices, talk about them, it changes our design. So in all of this, the technology part is actually, when you come down to it, pretty easy. The hard part's getting people to use it and to understand it. and that technology is constantly changing, which makes everybody sort of uneasy all the time. Everything I thought was true is now false, or at least half of what I thought was true is false, and I don't know which half. So these are some instances of changes which are, in some sense, deeply societal. Technical change, if I can, in fact, along the DNA, restore the tag-ins, the telomeres, you don't age. Well, that's interesting. Gee, I married you. I thought it was good for 30, 40, maybe 50 years. Now it's 200 years. I'm not so sure about this. So we have these impacts. There is a group, they don't work for more than about 50 milliseconds, but they have been able to do a form of deposition, thin film deposition, with tiny nanodomain capacitors that are storing enough energy that you could conceive of electric airplanes. Now, they're also sort of like bombs, but there's a lot of energy in a very, very tiny space. No one knew. The way they've been doing it is putting magnetic fields that enhance the ability of plates to store. So it's no longer the physical characteristics of the dielectric. There's a new way of imposing charge on tiny, who knew? I still ask, I'm asking around, I should come to Stanford and ask, but I ask around in Berkeley and the physics crowd doesn't know why it works. So there's a whole series of things that are coming that are going to have this kind of deep power. What are we supposed to do about it? Well, first, we've got to pay attention. The rule for us at Sun, or Bill Joy's rule, was innovation occurs. Sub-theorem. It occurs somewhere else. So if you're not paying attention, the kid in the garage does something that completely changes your business. And I don't care if you're Siemens or you're the biggest company around, somebody coming up with something different and new, no one saw Google coming, all these things suddenly creep up on you. So going back to my little chart of who's blue, where are these kids that are coming? Where are the kids that were us back then? And how much time are we spending talking to them? That's a good question to explore. So in all of this, I'll go quickly through the gods. Vannevar Bush, 1945. Consider a future device for individual use, which is a sort of mechanized private file and library, a memex. In an individual stores all his books, records, communications, mechanized so that it may be consulted with exceeding speed and flexibility. It's an enlarged, intimate supplement to his memory. It's called an iPad, and everybody's got one. So that's 1945. There were no computers in some sense, except for something in Germany. On the top are slanted, translucent screens on which material can be projected for convenient reading. 1945. So, next one, Turing. So this is his paper which led to the Turing Test. It was, let's have a game to see if you can fool people. Can machines think? That's sort of a dumb question. I mean, it's very hard to get, what does that question mean? Can we imitate? That's a reality way of getting a grip on this issue. So that's where we came up with this Turing Test that's going on every year. But deep in that same issue, that same article, he wrote this. It's probably possible to rear a complete individual from a single cell of the skin, say, of a man. That was 1950. Well, I just 2 slides ago showed the name of the man named Yamanaka that has been doing this at UC San Francisco and Kyoto. Yamanaka induced pluripotent stem cells, takes 4 genes, now down to 3, and takes your skin cell and reverts it to an undifferentiated state, and it can then become a cartilage cell, or a muscle cell, or a bone cell. 1950, Turing saw the capability for this to happen. So there's a Licklider. The hope is, 1960, that in not too many years, human brains and computer machines will be coupled together very tightly, and that the resulting partnership will think as no human brain has ever thought and process data in a way not approached by the information handling machines we know today. Today, that sounds sort of, well, yes, that's what we're working on. 1960, that's the roadmap. That's what we're focused on. And then I'll do one more. Engelbart. The computer has many other capabilities for manipulating and displaying information. significant benefit to the human in non-mathematical processes of planning, organizing, and studying. Now, he did have the benefit of the World War II experience where rational organization of production was enhanced by devices that kept track of stuff. So there was a merger already. Wartime has an enormous power. You remember, maybe you don't remember, I've read about the amazing transformation. Here we are in Arizona where government is hated. When the United States government did something, that is, mobilized the entire economy. There's a famous poster in Richmond, California, where, remember, all automobile plants were shut. They became tank production capabilities, and there's a big poster of Rosie the Riveter, who made those tanks in Richmond, and we overwhelmed Germany by our production capability organized by the government. So the ability for us to take significant power of these devices to do planning is what much of our software is building in, not only to the design process, but into the life cycle process of understanding where is all this stuff coming from, what's it being transformed into, what could it be transformed into, where is it going to go, and at the very end of it, can it be, in turn, brought back into the cycle? We're just at the beginning of doing what Engelbart was discussing back in 1962. And then there's Sutherland. And Sutherland, it's only worthwhile to make drawings of the computer if you get something more out of the drawing than just a drawing. That's what we're in the business of. So all of these insights are sources of power. They're sources of new capabilities. What is there at the bottom that makes this stuff work? Well, one of the nicest things about the networking part of all this was somebody, probably Bob Kahn, coupled with Vint Cerf, said, you know, if we make each portion of the network, each layer of the stack, completely independent of the other one, nobody has to ask permission. I don't have to communicate with anybody. I've just figured out that putting a 64K baud, I'm doing 64K transformations on a phone line on twisted pair, I could just swap that out for fiber and nothing in the stack above would change. So I'm free to do whatever I want to do. That layering idea, that capability to open things up, was discussed yesterday at great length in this essential, I think quite critical project, the Green Keystone Project, to allow all of us doing industrial management, inventory, logistics, keeping track of things, designing things, aiding engineers in understanding the energy and material components of what they're building, and the life cycle components of what they're building, not as an add-on at the end, but drawing directly from those that are making things from their databases, from the vendor's database about every gear, every tiny component that will ultimately go into a car or a plane. Well, we've got stovepipes. Everybody's made their own. This initiative to make these things come together could be just a powerful freeing of all of our design software, because at the bottom, the materials part is going to be interoperable. So we can make innovations at one level and know we can share stuff with somebody else. It's going to give us a brand new capability, I think, of innovating in territories. Bill Gates was on stage a year ago or so, and somebody, it was one of these Fortune magazine things, and Gates is being asked, don't you think the government should be taken over by business, which would be so much more efficient and really run things? And Emily Gates said, have you ever worked in a company? I mean, really? Don't ask for things you're not quite sure what you're going to get here. All of us have suffered through this. Nobody listens. Nobody understands. If I could find a way to enable new engineering design by letting some kid cut loose, knowing whatever he did was not going to bring down the house, it was going to fit in, it had a contract with other components of the software around, I would be able to say, I'm sponsoring innovation. I don't even need to know what it is. Chuck started this stuff with these electrostatic screens, and he's trying to explain to people, we've made oscilloscopes, you know, these displays could be useful. kill it. So he's the only guy that I know at HP, maybe there were others, that got this award for being, what were you, the disobedient, I don't know, just the hellraiser that just said, I don't care if the president told me to kill it. The revered Packard told you to kill it? Yeah. He got direct orders, kill it. Did he obey? No, he didn't care. I'm going to go build this thing because it's going to be useful to somebody. You need people like that in your organization, and it's don't let them. Now, I put some other lists down here about where is everything. We've got these mirror world things. This trash track thing I like is because it's following what yesterday's session was about. Where is all the trash? Once you figure that out, you suddenly change your opinion about what you're going to do in design and how it's going to affect your kids. So, a lot of things are going on. Now, here's why I assert we're also in a new state. Here's how many we are as of an hour or two ago. 311 million Americans, 6.9. So we're going to have some party. I think Sunday night we pass over the 7 billion line. I don't know, some point. That's the number from the World Census operation. So that's a lot of people. How many things do they have? 5.1, 5.2 billion mobile phones. Well, maybe more. We've got 1 billion trucks. We've got little sensors all over the place. Most of them slightly inaccurate and some highly inaccurate. We've got all this stuff out here, so let's add them up. And let's add in these lights. Not one of them has an address. So how do I turn them off? I have one control. I can't speak to the individual ones. There's no need for a number of these lights to be on. But they're on. We're just pumping power out, gone. Motors. How many have an individually addressed motor? Tough. Think of all the wire in the roof here. It is massive up there. Nobody, I guarantee you, in this hotel knows the as-built wiring diagram because somebody had an initial diagram and then they ran into the pillar. And so it doesn't look at all up there as they think. So it leads to 1 trillion unconnected objects. Ping said I should stop. So this is an opportunity. This is the software for us to really make a huge difference with. And so I'm going to end with, I'll show you my very last assertion. We're in a new era of design. There are new objects. There are existing ones not connected, not interchanging information, not managed, not part of any of our design software. Stuff. Things are coming alive. There's a metaphor. The lights are coming alive. The motors are coming alive. The sensors are telling us things we didn't know. Weaving a new control mechanism out of this is an opportunity for us that is beyond any of our past opportunities. New metaphors are coming. New language to describe them is coming. So what we want to do is follow what some really smart people, Davidson, a Berkeley philosopher, said, you know, when you talk about language and for two people to understand each other, you just can't land on a desert island, meet somebody and say, I'd like a glass of water, please. They don't speak your language. You have to approximate your behavior and your words to their response. How many people fully understand what their spouse says to them? I mean, so we have this problem. We've erased the boundary between knowing a language and knowing our way around the world. We have to give up this idea that you learn a language and then you apply it to cases. Cases and language are the same. Rorty says, think about that. Davidson says language and culture, well, here's a metaphor, are very much as Darwin taught us to think of the history of a coral reef. Old metaphors are constantly dying off into literalness. And the last two comments. I've always loved this quote. And this is one of the things over the years, every time I'm attempting to persuade a human of something, you need this, the technology will do this, we have these opportunities, maybe. I remember this, philosophy comes from the collision of ideas, which create problems. Ideas come from life. Life changes. So do the ideas, so do the collisions. That's the state we're in at this moment. The collisions breed puzzles, but when life changes, these puzzles are not so much answered as die away. Ideas perish from inanition, not using them, far more frequently than as a result of being refuted by argument. Every time I'm attempted to persuade someone banning encryption exports is a bad idea, I find that I argue and it's useless. I have to change the metaphor. And it's not that we have technology in a can that can be constrained by export regulations. We have a network-centric world in which great things, use the Army as an example, benefit by everything being networked, and it has to be secure. So you change the metaphor, you change the argument, you change the mind, you find new adoption, you get a power to get humans to understand what your technical thing is. My last slide goes to the god of innovation, Edwin Land. Redesign is not so much having a new idea as stopping having an old idea. Invention is a sudden cessation of stupidity. And with that, I should cease. Thank you very much.
Oh, sure. So we have some mics in the audience, and we'll take questions, starting with John Petty.
So, John, I was curious about your first chart where you were showing the innovation development over years, starting way back when, and in the left-hand column, you had the source, I assume the source of the funding agency that was empowering this technology development. And it was curious to me that the funding agency, up until about the 60s, was typically a government or a government-related form. And then there was a gap where there wasn't any, and then the last two items, again, were the government. I was wondering if you'd speak to the government's role with regard to empowering innovation.
This is John's question, I think, is a very deep one, because there is a mythology, and we're all part of it, that technical change is, my God, going to bring wonderful wealth to everybody tomorrow. And I'm often caught in this, because if you go wander around in Africa where people have nothing, and you say, so what would really make a change? Well, it turns out not super high technology would make a change. Getting some water would be a useful thing. Governments will intercede when the belief, the mythology is that where they put the money is going to yield a great big return. NIH gets gigantic money because elderly legislators have a feeling it'd be a good thing to get that cancer tackled before, I get a little older here. So the 1960s period, when you think about it, Licklider was the first person at the Defense Department's Advanced Research Projects Agency, ARPA. So Licklider and a little group in the 60s get defense money, killer money, because things are bad out there. You want to be able to have new technology to communicate. You want new technology, new materials. The kinetic people would like to have new ways to kill people with objects. So there's a lot of money going into this. And it spread to the only receptors that yielded new ideas. We had the gigantic industrial labs. Bell Labs existed at that time. So the government money went to universities. And every person in this room, I assert, benefited from that. And in China, there was nothing. Now, times have changed. China is putting a gigantic amount of money into innovation, in particular in energy, and we, as the slide in some sense shows, have been cutting back. There is a hope, which last week took I guess a 30% hit, which is the new ARPA-like entity in the Department of Energy. And they've been running around trying to find anybody that's got any new energy technology. The lithium battery is a direct result of that. And that's called ARPA-E. But these motivations that cause government entities to do this sort of stuff, either the defense guys who would love to go figure out more efficient ways to kill people, intelligence agencies like to figure out how to tell the defense guys who to kill, or the energy guys that would like to figure out a way that we could somehow not collapse when the power goes out. Chuck and I were laughing. There was a period of time when we stupid computer people had the computers break. Now we're so happy because our computers are far more reliable than the power system. The power system goes out all the time. So in any case, so this point you pick out about where are the sources of funding is a very critical And it's not only sources, the two big pools in all the years of computing and network and so forth, National Science Foundation in the United States, National Science Foundation and DARPA, or the Defense Department. A DARPA contract got you a lot of money and report once in a while. The National Science Foundation thing got you a little money and report next week or every 3 weeks on what you're up to. So the speed of innovation is significantly inhibited by that sort of constantly cycle you thing. And so there's a style of investing money. I went off from Sun to go to Kleiner, mainly because Bill Joy had gone there. And John Doerr and the crew at Kleiner are extraordinarily smart people. And by the way, they have a lot of money. Doerr just can raise $1 billion without blinking. He and Vinod Khosla, the old Sun president, did some true, well, how should I say this politely, stupid investments, because their sense of timing, drawn from the world of computing, was off by someone yesterday gave a great talk who was Hassan, who's a chemical engineer. Chemical engineers know about pipes and valves and rust and corrosion, and it breaks, and oh my God. Computer people don't know about that. And so they have a feeling that if you put $100 million in, something will be built. Well, in the next 6 months. Wrong. It's going to take 4 years just to get the siting proper. And so anyway, so the investments have different paces and different quantities. And, you know, I mean, this is sort of half a joke, but not really. I'd take Chuck, who knows more about this than anybody, and put him as the czar, because he can detect bullshit when people come in, and he can figure out who smart people are to ladle the money out, and he could get on with it. But the trouble is we have no money now. And I am very concerned that the innovations occurring, deep innovations that are occurring in China, are going to upset everybody's expectations. Oh, the Chinese just copied. Well, 3 months ago, Tsinghua University, sort of the MIT of China, sent 137 professors on planes to Berkeley. They would have gone to Stanford, but I won't make jokes. So they came to Berkeley. 137 professors that spent a week on the Berkeley campus meeting everybody in every discipline. And the opening session, Burgeneau, who's a materials physicist that runs Berkeley, Burgeneau got up, and his lab's very well known, and he said, in the field of single molecule thick graphene, the world's best laboratory is at Tsinghua. There are 3 Nobels on the panel, and every one of them is saying the same thing. The innovation going on in China is massive. And one area of this is, not only do they do IPv6 and have the world's biggest IPv6, they have a commitment to redoing the power grid. You know, solid state transformers, all sorts of mechanisms to detect what's going on in the grid. We have almost nothing like that. So there are very serious areas of investment where I'm afraid, are lagging. And you know, we can get on into the role of education and how we get the kids going, but some of our policies right now are not, in fact, at the level in the 1960s that yielded so many of the ideas that have yielded us. Long answer. Sorry, I should stop.
It's okay, John. Thank you.
Great.